Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, Trump's Big Week. While President Trump continues to make huge foreign policy gains in the Korean Peninsula and beyond, the Mueller witch hunt continues at home. Kimberley Strassel at the Wall Street Journal is out with a bombshell new piece titled, "What About That FBI Source? Did the Bureau Engage in Outright Spying Against the 2016 Trump Campaign?" Joining me now to explain more from the Wall Street Journal is the author of that piece, Kim Strassel. Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Give us the quick synopsis of what you've found and why this is so pivotal and so unusual at this setting.
Well, look, up until last week, all we knew was that House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes had initiated a new line of inquiry and was demanding new documents from the Department of Justice. But then, in their desire to make Chairman Nunes look bad and justify why they were not giving those documents, someone in the government leaked a lot of details about what was happening. It turns out he's asking about a top-secret government source who has worked for the FBI and the CIA, who is a U.S. citizen, would seem to have some sort of entanglement with foreign intelligence agencies or maybe is based overseas. And based on all those breadcrumbs and some reporting, I've got a pretty good sense of who it is, and it does look as though, indeed, there was an FBI attempt, a successful one, to basically go out and spy with a human asset on the Trump campaign.
Now, what about the timing, right? The timing about all of this is critical. Do we understand the timing, and what are the implications for that?
Yeah, it's so important because, remember, the FBI has been doggedly sticking with this story, that what initiated this counterintelligence probe was a tip that they got in July about this supposed drunken conversation of a junior campaign aide named George Papadopoulos. Well, if for any reason we find out that this person, this asset of theirs, was in fact surveilling or spying on the Trump campaign prior to that time, then they've got an issue, right? Because that's no longer their origin story. And they must have had something else that they were basing this on, whether it be the dossier or some other information that they were using as a reason to go out and surveil the Trump campaign.
Now, how are we going to figure out the solution to this? I mean, every time Trey Gowdy and Devin Nunes and others go over to the Department of Justice, they get the stiff arm, even though there's subpoenas in place. How do they actually figure this out?
You know, we have a great piece in the Journal today by a former FBI officer just talking, and his job was, in fact, to fulfill congressional requests, talking about how obnoxious and outrageous it is that the Department of Justice is not complying with simple requests, much less subpoenas from Congress. And the fact, by the way, that they didn't give this information over to Chairman Nunes all the way last year when he said he was investigating the FBI's conduct is really pretty striking. But look, they're going to have to, Congress as a body, and the good news is Chairman Nunes looks to have the backing of all the leadership and the other members in the Republican Party, make it clear that if the Department of Justice does not turn this over, that they will move to contempt. And with any luck, also, the White House is putting out the message that they need to cooperate and hand over documents.
But I thought the White House was actually backing up the Department of Justice at this point, weren't they?
Well, it's interesting. The Department of Justice made quite a big deal in its letter back to Chairman Nunes about how it had this had all been done in consultation with the White House. But curiously, it did agree to sit down with Chairman Nunes, and I think probably they have the order to accommodate him in some way. They're still trying to do it without getting out of having to hand over actual documents. But as that is what Chairman Nunes and others are actually after, it would seem that's what they're going to need to hand over to fulfill that request.
Yeah, you know what? I, as one who's actually been over to the Department of Justice and sat in those meetings and listened to these blowhards tell me how Congress has no right to see this stuff, and I got to tell you, it really is offensive. And at what point does the Constitution actually come into play? I mean, they give lip service to oversight, but here they are leaking. I mean, it's pretty well documented that they're leaking. But what is it that they think they can't and shouldn't show to Congress, which is essentially the American people?
Look, you know this better than anyone. We have processes in place whereby Congress gets to oversee the executive branch. They can't just say, give us everything. They have to have specific cause, reason, things that they're looking for. And as this piece we ran today made clear, when those cases came up, the Department of Justice is always helped and been good about it. And we also have processes whereby, in particular, the Gang of Eight, right? The senior members of our intelligence committees, the leadership, can see anything in a classified situation. So any arguments that this should be off limits are completely bogus, and people should read them for what they are, which is an attempt by the Department of Justice and the FBI, it would seem, to protect something that they simply don't want people to know because it might prove embarrassing.
Yeah, and that's really at the heart of it. It proves embarrassing. And I got to tell you, from my vantage point, having been there, every member of Congress, both sides of the aisle, by the way, ought to be standing behind Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy and John Ratcliffe and those investigators that are going in there. Senator Grassley, for instance. But Kim Strassel is a great piece in the Wall Street Journal. She's one of the best writers out there and best reporters. So thank you for joining us tonight. And thanks for that great piece that you put out.